Here we go. All right, folks. We're sorry. This is a third time's a charm, right? So here we are trying it once again. We're going to start from the beginning and just crank right through this. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Neckbottle. Welcome to the show. We are two frustrated HR ladies with technology.
Sadly, we are not any frustrated IT ladies. That would be helpful.
Everything would have been fine had the internet just not gone through a blank, right? But you know what? That's just the nature of what's going on right now. Everything's all virtual, everything's all overloaded, and blah.
Yeah. That is one super advantage I have of living smack in the middle of the city, is that I have incredibly good internet because there's no like long distances or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm on this side, but that's okay because we're here to talk about internet. That's not what we do.
That's all right.
We're here to talk about HR. Darn it.
We're here to talk about HR. And I'm Suzanne Lucas, the evil HR lady, and not the evil IT lady. And yeah, not
That's
that.
like a whole nother career right there.
That would be it. I have no desire to do that career. None, but we are going to talk a little bit about an IT guy today and careers. So that wasn't even a planned segue.
That was a good segue.
We happen to have IT problems. So this man, Sebastian Ramirez, tweeted this. He said, "I saw a job post the other day. It required 4+ years of experience in Fast API. I couldn't apply as I only have 1.5+ years of experience since I created the thing. Maybe it's time to reevaluate that years of experience equals skill level." And I saw that and I retweeted it with, "This is an example of why people hate recruiters." And, you know, I got some responses like, of course, yeah, that sucks. But then I also got some recruiters who I know and respect saying, hey, it's not our job to write the job description. That's something from the hiring manager. This shouldn't reflect on us. And while I know and respect these people, I have to point out it does reflect on you. It does reflect on the recruiter.
Totally.
So if it's going to reflect on you, maybe you should take some ownership of it.
Well, and not to mention hiring managers are not responsible for knowing how to write a corporate or a company job description. That's not their job.
No, and most hiring managers don't hire very often. You know, most people don't have hundreds of people in their teams or massive turnover. They manage 3 or 4 people, and they may have one person quit every other year. This isn't something that they do every day, and it's not something they need to know how to do so much because it's such a tiny part of their job, whereas that's the full-time job of the recruiter. And I have total empathy and sympathy for these recruiters because dealing with hiring managers isn't always easy. But this is something that job candidates see as the recruiter's job. And when they then get hired, they take that belief into their roles as future hiring managers and in dealing with all of HR. And I know that there's a movement to separate out recruiters from human resources, and they should be separate, but they're not. They're together. And so the result of this is we can say, oh, it's the hiring manager's job to write the job description, which is not. But because everybody sees it as the job of the recruiters, this is someplace where the recruiters really need to step in and take their role as the subject matter experts in this.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting. There's a lot going on with recruiters. There's a lot of frustration going on with recruiters from the job field. And I see that with all the transition work that I do over at the Honor Foundation. And, you know, there's a lot of conversation that goes around about finding a job, and people right now in general are kind of programmed with what's going on in the recruiting world because they submit an application or they submit a resume online or whatever the process is, but they never hear anything back, and that is a very strong point of frustration and contention. And I think it really works against corporations and companies. It doesn't matter what size it is, because it's a very poor expression of customer service. I mean, this person could still be spending money for your organization, even if you decide not to hire them. But I think what happens is that that we do have a younger recruiting population, and who is heavily reliant on technology. And what happens is that with technology, when you've got an ATS of some kind, your information goes into, when you submit it, it goes into one of three buckets: A, B, or C. And A obviously is the most qualified based off of what your resume says or what a resume says. B is okay, could be, and then C is no. And what happens is that I think people who are very tech reliant are failing to look in the B bucket, because that's where a lot of qualified individuals are actually housed.
I think that's really, really true. And especially, I think this happens when you get lots and lots of applications, which right now in some sectors, there's super high unemployment. And the problem is that the computers are only as good as the programmers and then the end user.
Yep.
And the programmers are not HR experts.
No.
They're just not. That they're the IT people. That's who we should aspire to be, to deal with our technical troubles. But there's so many people in that B bucket that maybe they didn't have the keyword that the recruiter put in to the applicant tracking system. Right. But it's something that they could do. And I had somebody share a story with me once about, she applied for a job. She thought for sure she would at least be interviewed. And of course, people say this all of the time. They think they will be, but you never know. But she didn't get any call back, and she followed up, and the recruiter said, oh, I didn't ever see your resume. So they did a search, and it turned out that the job was looking for somebody to do undergraduate career advising. And it required 4 years of undergraduate career advising experience. Well, she had 7 years of graduate student career advising. And so, but when the recruiter had put in and with the algorithm and all that, it's a graduate student, and then just said, no, she doesn't have the experience. Right. Granted, they're not exactly the same, but if a human had looked at that, they would have gone, oh, that's pretty much the same thing.
Right. And, there's a lot of people that lined up in the A bucket that never should be in the A bucket, because you have job hoppers, you've got people. I mean, the system is not designed to identify how long you've been with an organization. And, if you got somebody who's applying for a job and every 18 months to 2 years they're hopping, well, and they've got a trail of that, that's not necessarily the best candidate in the world, in my opinion. I mean, that's one of many things that could be considered a flag.
Right. And there's always can be good reasons for those things. So you don't want to automatically eliminate somebody like that, but you definitely want to ask the question. And then the other thing is with keywords. Mm-hmm. And I mean, here's an embarrassing hiring story of my own. I needed a temp, so it wasn't the big, bad, horrible long-term decision. And I interviewed several people, and I needed someone that could do Microsoft Access. And I asked this woman, can you do Microsoft Access? She said yes. I said, can you write queries? She said yes. And I hired her, and it turns out that she had used Microsoft Access, but she'd only used it as an end user, never as anybody.
Not as a programmer. Yeah.
And, her resume said, oh yeah, I have all this experience in it. Well, she had experience opening a file and clicking run on things. And I was too naive. This was the way beginning of my career to realize that those are separate skills. And because I would have never put on my resume that I could do Microsoft Access if all I could do was run a database that somebody else had already made.
Yeah.
But
Well,
she did. And then when I looked back on that job, when they interviewed me for my job, one of the questions that I got asked was about my Microsoft Access skills. And they kept asking me these detailed questions about how to do things. And I was like, well, I said I can do it. Why are you out? Now I understand.
now you know why.
Because I would have never claimed
Yeah.
that I could do it when I couldn't. But this woman would have shown up in the ATS search because she said she could do it. Whereas somebody like me who probably had more, well, definitely had more skills, would have been like less, I'm not perfect at it. And you can miss people out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to look for, and a resume is not always the thing that you need to look for. And I'm not gonna steal your thunder on this, but you have to look at the resume and you have to look at the application itself, and it's a combined effort because the resume is just a billboard, but the application is the one that you hold the candidates accountable for what it is that they're saying. And if they say that they can do something and it turns out that they can't, or they don't answer the ADA question and it turns out that they really do need an accommodation or whatever, right? There's a lot of different things that you can look at, and you want to look for the behaviors. I'll be honest with you. I'm very particular about reviewing an application, but I also get really great hires in at the same time because I'm so particular. And if you put in as a recruiter, when I'm wearing my recruiter's hat, if I see in the job history section of an application, you write the words "see resume," I will not look at you. I just asked you to put your best foot forward, and all you did was demonstrated a shortcut. I will not look at you because
now you all know
told
how to
me
get a
that
job
you're a
with
problem.
Brenda.
What's that?
Then now we all know how to get a job with Brenda.
No, that's just one of many. But I'm tough. I'm sorry, I'm tough. But the people that I hire for are looking for the best. And so, it's got to be a little bit more critiquey than normal.
But I think this is one of the problems that people don't understand when they're applying for jobs, because they ask, you just said to upload my resume, and now you're asking me to fill in this other thing where I'm repeating the information that I have on my resume. What a waste of time. And it can be a huge waste of time. But like you said, a resume is a billboard or a marketing document.
Right.
And on the application, frequently the application will ask you to list all the jobs you've had.
It depends. It depends on the company and the application.
Sure. There's a lot of variation. But
right, exactly.
Ask that, what list all of them. Your resume isn't required to list all of the jobs you've had. Your resume isn't required to list why you left the job. Applications will often ask why you left. Have you ever been fired? Those types of things are different questions.
Yes.
And as you said, when it comes down to saying, okay, you said you had a bachelor's degree and we find out you don't, it's on that official application where it becomes much more of an issue. I mean, you shouldn't lie on your resume either. I'm not advocating lying on your resume, but
in resumes are inflated.
Yeah. Well, applications are too, but
yeah, but resume tends to be a little bit more inflated than an application though.
But I don't think a lot of job candidates understand that. And
no,
I don't think that recruiting as a whole does a good job of explaining why we ask the things that we ask.
Yeah.
And that can be a tough thing. And one of the things that you mentioned a little bit ago was about recruiters being young and inexperienced. And maybe you'd like to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So about 9 years ago, I can't believe it was 9 years ago. My gosh.
Time flies.
He was right. I was hired in for the last Fortune 500 company that I worked for, and this is where I had the bulk of my HR experience. I mean, the real get into the weeds, very high, high amount of variety that came out of this particular job. Anyway, the recruiter that was talking to me had made a comment. We were talking about what the salary and the compensation was. Well, it turns out that she quoted me higher than what the position actually, what I was offered. And so when I went back to the company, and I mean, I wasn't going to not take the job because it was a great opportunity, and still the salary was way more than I thought I could get. So it worked out, which is great. But when I had a conversation about it with the vice president several months later, I explained to her what happened. She said, "Yeah, that was a very common thing that was taking place with that individual." And she's no longer with the organization. So, when my experience with her was good. She was a little bit younger than I was at the time, but I didn't have a problem with it. What I saw with her is that even though she was pleasant and she was great to deal with, again, it comes back to really truly knowing the position, knowing what the salary range is for a particular area. I mean, it was a miss. And had it been somebody else, that would have been a problem. But it turned out that when I got a promotion, I was still being underpaid from other team members that were coming in that I was mentoring. So it took me a couple years to get above all of that with my performance. And I'll tell you what, I work very, very hard. But when I work with my clients and we talk about recruiting, or talk to recruiters who are young and trying to break through HR, what they're missing is an element of that. They don't know how to connect with the people that they're interviewing. And I think that's probably the best way to put it. And so that is something that companies really should be focusing in on, is investing in their development so they're making the right connections. And I'm not just talking about digital connections on LinkedIn or digital connections with, other organizations where they can mine talent. I'm talking about putting the human back into human resources and really being able to take a moment and say, is this the right person for the job? And I think what happens is that a number of people are trying to recruit for several positions at once, and that takes away the ability to actually make that really great connection so you get a good read.
Well, and I also think they need to connect with the hiring managers and understand the position. And
Totally.
that is not something that is often an entry-level job. And yet we see recruiting often as an entry-level job.
Yeah.
And so, with this original tweet from this guy that invented this programming language, I assume it's a programming language, this FAST API, I admit I'd never heard of it. And so if I am an overwhelmed recruiter and I get this job description saying you need 4+ years of this particular program, I'm just going to assume that's what's required. Right. Now, an experienced recruiter who is deep in that field, whatever you use FAST API to do, would know to push back and say, this is a new program. And of course, the hiring manager should have absolutely known that. Absolutely should have known that. And we can talk all day about bad hiring managers because by golly, they exist. But this comes down on the recruiter's head. And it's an inexperienced recruiter that either doesn't know or isn't confident enough to push back and ask questions. And I've also seen crazy things come up on online job postings. A while ago, there was a job for an internist, and it said, women don't do well in this job. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that while you're drinking. You're going to spit. And, I contacted the company, and they were properly horrified. They took it down. But what had happened is the hiring manager had just written it and somebody had posted it without reading through it, obviously, because any recruiter would have caught that immediately. Women don't do well in this job. Nobody knows in this situation who that hiring manager was. We don't go and, get our pitchforks out for the hiring manager, who I'm going to assume is male, but maybe not. But we say, oh my gosh, the recruiter that put this in, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
And those things happen. I've also been Caucasian preferred. How does that even get?
I was helping one of my clients write a job description, and the first thing at the top of it was, "This position may not be for you."
Well, it's accurate.
Like, okay, so we got a little work to do here. It was very cute. But you know what? The thing is that I totally understood his frustration, and I know why he wrote it. So it wasn't like he was trying to be a jerk or anything like that. He was just genuinely frustrated with what he kept running into. And yeah, so I totally appreciate it. I mean, it was funny. I just died laughing. And once he came down off of writing it, and I said, "So we're just gonna call this your vent." You got great stuff in here, but I'm going to skinny this down for you a little bit, and we're going to come up with a real killer of a job ad.
Well, he wasn't wrong. This job is not for everybody.
This job may not be for you. I loved it. But
I do have to say, if I was a female internist looking for a hospital's job, which is what this was, and I saw this position, women don't do well here, I'd be like, thanks so much for letting me know that I never, ever, ever want to work for you.
Right. But you know what? That doesn't do anything for branding your company as an employer of choice. Not to mention, see, that's a thing that I think a lot of recruiters forget. So it's like medical physicians, it's like medical staff, right? They get desensitized in their environment, right? I mean, years ago, I have an arrhythmia, and I was getting ultrasounded for it and all this other good stuff. Well, I'm sitting on the table. I'm not necessarily fully clothed, and this nurse just like walks out, and the door just takes its sweet time closing, and everybody that was at the center who could see me in all of my glory was male. And let me tell you, this is one of the few times that people will actually see me lob somebody's head off and throw it across the window. It happened at that moment. And but she's so desensitized. She never would have thought of that, and she should, So so recruiters, they can get desensitized from certain things, and one of the things that it's that tunnel vision. It just starts coming in, and people have to open their apertures when they start going down that tunnel, and it's not an easy thing to catch. But recruiters, if they don't remember that they're at the tip of the sword when it comes to talking to these people or engaging with them, and they're not taught this, and that's part of the reason why development is so important, is that you have to constantly reinforce the customer service aspect of this. When was the last time you had to sit in the shoes of the person on the other side going through that particular experience? And oh, by the way, are they spending money with your company still? Because if you're not branding yourself as an employer of choice, it means that you're treating your applicants just as good as you treat your clients and your customers. You've got a tipped scale at this point.
Well, you do. And, I often say recruiters are really part of the PR department. And because
don't tell them that.
Nobody likes it when I say that, by the way.
Your PR people will come down on your head.
PR people don't like it, and the recruiters don't like it. So I figure if I offend everybody, it's pretty good. But they deal more with outside people than anybody but the sales department.
Yep.
And like you said, these can be your customers, and furthermore, they can be your future clients and your future vendors. And if you treat a candidate poorly and then don't hire that person, they're going to find a job somewhere else. They just will.
Yeah.
And then your business is going to try to sell something to that business, and they're going to be like, no, I don't want to deal with this company because they suck. And the reason why they think that goes back to how they feel that they were treated.
Yeah.
And the ghosting, that's a huge
Yes.
problem. It's a
Big.
huge problem. And I hear from so many recruiters, well, you don't understand how busy I am. And I'm like, I understand how to push a button on an applicant tracking system that says, send an email to everybody saying the position has been filled. It's fantastic if you can give detailed feedback, although I totally understand why most people don't want to do it, and I support why they don't. But just an email saying thanks but no thanks is 1,000 times better than silence.
Yeah. And it's the ghosting thing is it's awful. I mean, it's absolutely awful. And that comes back to my number one live and rule die of life, and that is, in the absence of information, people make stuff up. So people are people are very used to being ghosted as job candidates, but it does absolutely nothing for your company to think that you're, because in my past, when I went for positions and I didn't hear anything, I was like, thank God that that's not an organization that I'm working for, even though I know they've got a good reputation, because quite frankly, if they're going to treat me like that as a candidate, how are they going to treat me as an employee?
Right. When they're trying to sell you on the business. I mean, this is something that people also don't understand. A job interview is a two-way street. Totally. You're interviewing the company just as much as the company is interviewing you. Yep. And so many people see it more as this beauty pageant thing where you're standing up on a stage and you're asking questions. Well, on a beauty pageant, the women in these ball gowns, they don't ever get to ask the judges any questions. And so many candidates take it that way. If I smile, if I look pretty, and I say everything right, then I'll get this job. Well, do you want the job? You don't even know. And there are plenty of jobs that are not for you.
That is very true.
Manager. And that's okay. There's plenty of jobs I would rather stick pins in my eyes than do. There's plenty of HR jobs I would rather stick pins in my eyes than do. And when you're desperate, I get it. And I'm never going to condemn somebody for taking a job that's not perfect. But if you're not desperate, if you're currently employed, you should be interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
Totally.
And it should be this two-way street, because you're going to spend more time in the office or even working from home with these people than you will with your family. Yes. So you want to make sure you'll be happy there.
Yeah. I remember years ago, I was at CarMax, and CarMax, I think their philosophy is still the same, is that, we want people to have we want them to have a good interviewing experience. We want everybody to feel good walking out of that interview, not give them the false sense of hope, but we want them to feel good because it is a good company and we do treat people with respect. But at the same time, that person could buy a car from us. And I know I keep reiterating this, but this is how important that stuff is. And I've always in my practices, I've always maintained that moving forward. When I was recruiting for aerospace is complicated to recruit for. And and so, when you're in a niche market and a niche industry, it's very complicated, and you have to rely on, what are you looking for skill set wise from a potential candidate? Help me understand what this is. And if I don't understand it because it's too technical, I'm going to send this information over to you. I'm going to send this application over, this resume over. I want you to take a look at it and give me some feedback because I'm not going to ask them the technical questions. That's your job. That's your area of expertise. I'm going to ask them questions about, are they going to be a fit for the organization? Are we going to start ruling out some undesired behaviors because we need the right behaviors in place? And people we lose sight of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing, is that delineation between the two roles there. Yeah. You're not going to be doing the super duper technical aerospace engineering things, but you need to know enough about it to be able to screen resumes effectively.
Absolutely.
And how you treat people is just so important. And when you were talking about CarMax and people might buy a car, I remembered a few years ago, I spoke with Hard Rock Cafe, and they were opening a new restaurant in Venice, I believe, Venice, Italy. Oh, no, I'm wrong, Florence, Italy. And they didn't have any restaurants anywhere nearby, so it wasn't like they could just, move some of the staff over to the new restaurant. They needed to hire everybody.
Right.
And as a new restaurant in an area which has a lot of restaurants and is known for its food, and no offense to Hard Rock Cafe, but it's not known for its food, they needed also to get clientele to get things started. And what they did was, everybody that applied, whether they got an interview or not, got a coupon for a free drink. And anybody that interviewed got a coupon for a free meal. And not only did they fill their 120 positions in 2 months, they were able to open on time, and they opened to a full house.
Yeah.
Or most people had these coupons, but every one of them had positive feelings about it, because you don't expect to get every job, but oh my gosh, hey, I got a coupon for a free meal, let's go. And you don't go by yourself, right? You take your friends, and so you have the candidate with one free meal, but she's got 3 friends or her family with them, and they're all buying meals in your brand new restaurant in a market that has a lot of competing restaurants. And they saw it from this viewpoint of, not only do we need to hire, but we need clientele. And oh my gosh, they did it, and they pulled it all together. And a lot of companies are like that. If you're treated poorly at a job interview at a particular grocery store, you're going to feel really great about going and shopping there again. And the answer is probably no.
Yeah. So if you're an organization that doesn't invest time with your recruiters, if there's any one position that you should really focus in on development and providing training and learning opportunities, it really is your recruiters, because they are sometimes the very first and the last experience anybody has with your organization. And if it's not good, look, recruiting is like dating. If you don't believe me, think about it for a while. It really is.
Exactly like
swipe left or swipe right. And in today's world, it's become very impersonal and very unprofessional. And do you really want your company to be seen that way? I mean, granted, you got 12,400 issues and challenges all happening at the same time. How much concern do you actually give towards people that you've decided not to hire? Not as much, but you know what? What's the legacy you want to leave with those folks? And it's going to start and stop with your recruiters. It absolutely will.
It absolutely will. And so many companies, they said, hire recruiters as kind of entry-level people. And that's probably okay when you're hiring entry-level people. And maybe not the best, but probably going to get away with it. But then when they're hiring higher level people, they turn to super expensive headhunters. And, I have a ton of headhunter friends who I love, and you're worth your weight in gold, but your commission on one senior executive is probably more than a lot of recruiters' annual salary.
Yeah.
It would probably be worth it to the company to invest in developing that kind of skill within your company.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's not going to matter if you have 50 employees. You don't need to have a recruiter on staff that is experienced in high-level finance people. But if you're a large company, you're going to have quite a few high-level finance people that you're going to be hiring. So maybe having somebody who's an expert in that area is cheaper in the long run for you. And it develops a good, positive relationship between the department and the recruiters and all of human resources. If I feel as a hiring manager that I can trust my recruiters, I'm also going to feel more that I can trust my business partner or my employee relations person, because I see it as all one team.
Yeah.
People don't see it as segregated as sometimes HR people see it. This is my siloed job. This is your siloed job. But the general person says, oh, you're in HR? I can't tell you how many people I've said, oh, I'm in HR. Oh, you recruit? I'm like, no, I have recruited in the past, but I don't do that now. And I once explained to a woman all about headcount because that's what I was doing. And she's like, oh, you're an admin. And I was like, no, I have an admin. But to her, it was just like, anyway, which I totally get because headcount out is just, anyway.
I remember a long time ago. I was in a lead position. I wouldn't call it supervisory, but I was in a lead position. And really, a lead is there to just make sure that the world doesn't fall apart, right? So we had interviewed this one girl, and they were, even though I had been in management for a while, they were working to develop me on my interviewing skills based off of the company's standards, which I thought was great. So I've been down this road. I've been formally developed in this area. And so I was only to sit into these interviews as an observer. So they did the first interview without me. We did the second interview, which was great. And I sat in on that one. And, anytime we went to make a hire, we always bounced it off the LGM to make sure that, the GM had the blessing on it. And this was my favorite mentor of all time. And we laugh about this. Thankfully, we laugh about it now. We didn't when it happened. But so he goes on vacation, and the assistant GM was the one that was making the offer. And they wanted me to sit on and watch the offer and how it went. So we bring her in. And this girl was absolutely nothing like she had interviewed on interview 1 and 2. The girl was a butt on the butt of the frog of a log. And it was, and she just she was just a total clam at this point, just like, bleh, right? And so no excitement, no gratitude, not that we would expect gratitude, but, none of the normal things that comes out of somebody getting a job offer. So I'm watching this and I'm just the observer, and he extends the offer and he's feeling weird about doing it. So she leaves. We've now given this offer and we're looking at each other and we're like, so the first day back, the GM, it happened to be the vice president of the corporation, came for an on-site visit. It was her first day. So I'm walking her around, showing her, giving her the tour, doing things that we normally do during orientation. And all of a sudden the threesome comes out. It's the GM, who's my favorite mentor, a regional vice president, and the vice president of the entire company. I'm walking around the corner. And I'm excited because this is cool. I get to introduce my first hire to, these guys. This is awesome. I know all 3 of them. And she gives them the limpest handshake possible, refuses to smile, has no energy whatsoever. And I got my butt handed to me. And from my favorite mentor, he's like, why the hell? And he chewed us both out. He said, why the hell did you guys even allow something like that? And I'm like, I'm just the observer. I'm not the one who has the ability to make this call. I didn't agree with it, but it's the AV. It's not. I'm just a lead, man. It's like, you guys have made it abundantly clear. I do not make decisions. You own it. So after my boss called down, he calmed down for a while. He looked at me, says, "Don't do it again." I'm like, trust me, I won't. But that those kinds of things happen. It's a learning experience. But it was a bad decision on part of the assistant at that time. And I asked him, I'm like, why did you make that? I said, why did you not like what, dude? And he's like, I didn't know what to do. He's like, I've never run into this before. It happens.
Well, and I think that also points out just how important the recruiting role is.
Yeah.
Because now you've got this employee that's now your problem.
And now boy, was she ever.
Did she last a long time?
She lasted 2.5, 3 years, and it was hell and misery every step of the way.
Yep. Yeah.
It just was. Yeah. But, like I said, it happens. And, we didn't have an in-house recruiter for that particular level of job. It was really up to the staff, and, lesson learned.
Well, and no one expects every hire to be perfect. Even experts in hiring make bad decisions, because hiring is an imperfect science. And
life is an imperfect science.
when you talked way at the beginning of this about how a lot of the recruiters are younger and they're heavily tech reliant, and every year I go to Unleash, which used to be HR Tech. I go to their conferences. They have 2 in Europe, and I go to both of them generally. And every year I meet with a zillion vendors who are sure that their brand of AI is going to revolutionize recruiting, and we will never need another recruiter again. And they're always wrong. They're always wrong. They're always very nice and very smart people. And they're so enthusiastic about their products. But it's only as good as the programmer. It is. And whoever's putting in the keywords and all of those things just don't solve the problem. You're never going to have a perfect hiring system. It's not going to be. And that's okay. Mistakes are going to happen. That's okay. But you don't want unnecessary mistakes to happen. You don't want people laughing about you on Twitter because you put, you must have so many years of experience with this program that hasn't been around for that long. And I also thought it was nice that the guy that invented this didn't identify the company that had put this ad up. That was very kind of him. But he could have, and we could have all laughed at him. The company, not at him.
And you don't want an entire workforce that's a mistake either.
No, you don't. You don't. And you really need, because hiring managers don't hire all that often in most jobs, they are really relying on the recruiter to show them what to do. Right. And from a legal standpoint, we laugh at the person who put in women don't do well. But holy smokes, when you want to sue for gender discrimination, that's Exhibit A. And how are you going to get around that? The court is not going to be like, oh, ha, 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 yes, it was the hiring manager, not the recruiter. So clearly it's, no, that went out under the company's name. There you go.
They both represent, and not to mention, they both have skin in the game, which means that they both hold a level of individual liability, and they can individually, they can be brought to court too.
And isn't that fun? No. And so you really want someone that doesn't have a basic understanding of the law doing these things for you. Yeah. Some of the questions people get asked. And some of these things, they need to be trained.
Yep.
When you're hiring one person a year, which is a lot for a lot of hiring managers, you should probably be trained every time you go through an interview process on what to ask and what not to ask. But the companies don't. They don't. And recruiters aren't necessarily in a position, especially there's like a power dynamic when you have the hiring manager is 45 years old with 20 years of experience, and the recruiter is 22 years old and has been out of college for 3 months. The recruiter isn't going to have the confidence to step back and say, hey, no, stop that. That Brenda or I would, because we're past that point of caring what people think of us. We're right. We're like, listen, you can't say that. And we're okay with that. But if you're young and inexperienced, well, gosh, they must know better. They're, a director. They know better. So I must be wrong on this. I'll check with my boss later, and in the meantime, you're setting your company up for a disaster. Yeah. And then, of course, not just from a legal standpoint, you have so many managers doing interviews that make no sense.
Yeah. And I'll wrap this one up. Do not ever, 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 ever ask the question, because this is a whole nother show. What type of animal do you see yourself as in an interview? Because I will fly to wherever you are and personally, lovingly slug you. So we only have just a few minutes left.
We have to save our time for slugging people.
That's right. I remember the day that I discovered somebody was doing that, and I was like, what does that have to do with anything? Anyway, that's all. Interview questions is a whole nother thing. And matter of fact,
a good topic. We should
interview and job postings, because you have a good one that's out there right now. We can't get into it, but you can actually find this over in Suzanne's group. So I'm gonna go ahead. Why don't you share with them about that, and we'll be good to go.
I have a Facebook group called Evil HR Lady, and we are discussing a very bad job posting right now.
Yes. Horrific.
And I will say, though, there is something that I like about it, because if you read through it, if you apply for this job, you know exactly what you're getting into. And that's a nice thing.
I don't think you do. But anyway, so where can they find us? Did I lose you again? Where can they find you?
So they can find me at my Facebook group, Evil HR Lady, or at my webpage, evilhrlady.org. And you can send me an email at evilhrlady@gmail.com.
There you go. And I have a group called the Next Gen Women in HR. And like Suzanne's group, we talk about all things human resources. But we do a lot of other things too. We do like free webinars. We're gonna, we just started kind of getting together once a month for lunch, just to have some fun and take a break from everything that's going on. And it's been a lot of fun. We do enjoy it, and they're a really great group of people that are over there. And you can find that group over on Facebook. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go ahead and flash up where you guys can find us on our social media. And it's been another week. Sorry about yet again all the technical difficulties, but it's just right now another problem to solve. And you can find us again actually every Tuesday at 9 a.m. We go live and talk about all things current and what is happening in the HR world. So we really appreciate you guys joining us and bearing with us with our technical difficulty. And we look forward to talking to you guys next week.
We'll see you next week.